my mom is like, despite the fact my dad's a hardcore Republican, my mom's actually like, she's a constitutional libertarian. So I had some.
Whoa!
Holy
Yeah,
smokes.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
That's a crazy oxymoron.
I know. But basically, like, she actually agrees with most of my points. It's just where I get into the whole, do it without government bit that she doesn't like.
You'll be like, Mom, I hate taxes. You're like, yeah, let's get rid of them. Son, they're a necessary evil that we need, okay?
Yeah, pretty much.
Trying to explain why we shouldn't have jail to my parents.
Oh yeah.
Wait,
Yeah,
so that constitutional libertarian is a oxymoron.
No, his dad's a Trump supporter. His mom's a constitutionalist.
And I said constitutional libertarianism is an oxymoron because in order to believe in the social contract, you have to believe in the initiation of force. So,
Yeah.
Basically, it's the best term I can come up for libertarian, but still a statist, which is, again, kind of an oxymoron. Basically, just what people traditionally think when they hear libertarian.
When statists think that they're libertarians, basically.
Basically.
Well, technically, these people are more like, we need a little bit of evil, in order to keep society going. But I came to realize that just doesn't work very well.
So a statist is an advocate of a political system in which the state has substantial centralized control over social and economic affairs. And I'm not for a substantial centralized control over social and economic affairs.
I don't know where you got that definition, but that's not accurate. Statist,
primarily
statist is a term which was coined, I think, by Murray Rothbard, and he was describing people who believed in the legitimacy of the state in general.
Merriam-Webster, concentration of economic controls and planning in the hands of a highly centralized government, often extending to government ownership of...
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with a certain kind of government. It's just government itself. That's why the term is statist and not centralist or federalist.
Either way, it's an argument over semantics. It really doesn't matter that much. But overall,
I'm not a statist.
Do you believe in the existence of the state and that states are legitimate?
I don't believe that the state is going away anytime soon. As of currently, to a small extent.
But do you think that the state is legitimate?
Do I think that the state is legitimate? In a lot of ways, no.
Actually, I want to kind of rebut that. I kind of want to rebut the state is not going away anytime soon because what do y'all think is going to happen when the dollar collapses?
Yeah, I mean, the state is going away. I'm not agreeing with that point. It's just I was trying to get to, the key to the issue, which is if you believe in the legitimacy of the state, then you're a statist. By default, that means that you believe that a political ruling class can justify itself.
Rothbard described the state as the organization of political means.
Yep.
Define organization of political means.
Question, guys.
I mean, could people even voluntarily, say an Anarcho-Capitalists organize for the?
Yeah, and that's where I'd have to disagree with that. If you look at all of political theory throughout history in regards to the justification for any sort of constitution or state system, the common theme which repeats itself, whether or not people like Hobbes, Rousseau, or Locke, or Aristotle realize it, is that the theme which repeats is that there's a monopoly on arbitration. That's what defines the state, is its ability to establish its laws, exempt itself from whatever rules, regardless of explanatory power, and enforce them however it sees fit.
Corey, is there, you got a book by Murray Rothbard?
Yes, it is. It's the anatomy of the state.
Oh yes, I love that book. I gotta
Love
read
it
it
too,
again.
man.
Could you raise it a bit higher?
All you ANCAP weirdos, please bust out your copy of the anatomy of the state.
Put it up a little higher.
Oh my god, it's on my phone.
Well, not closer, but a little higher. Say something.
I can't.
It's
On
beautiful.
my copy of that book is on my phone.
It's a beautiful book. I believe everyone should read it.
Yes.
I got 2 anarchist books in my room here.
Sorry, I was answering some DMs from Marie. I mean Mag. Anyway, as far as like, whether or not someone qualifies as a statist or what exactly that definition is, but I don't know if that argument already passed, but basically what I would say to that is it's an argument over semantics, and it's not really useful, because how else are you going to describe someone who believes in the state versus somebody who is an anarchist?
Do you believe in state authority? Yes or no? Because
it's a matter.
The mere existence of the state comes with centralization, as I was just explaining. That's the reason why. That's the only consistent definition.
You're really echoing out, buddy.
But
Eso, you're echoing out.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
I can
I
hear
can hear you.
Okay, well, that's
Can
the
you hear me?
That's the only consistent definition of statism.
And I'm not arguing that. I'm not. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the purpose of a word such as statism is essentially it's basically it's used to describe a particular belief, and that particular belief happens to be the legitimacy of the state. If you believe in the legitimacy of the state, you are a statist. If you want to try and work around that by saying, okay, well, I don't believe in complete control of the state, and dictionary.com says this, that, and the other thing, okay, that's great and all, but it doesn't really fucking matter, because you still believe in the legitimacy of the state. And what we were trying to describe you of as saying you're a statist, since you believe in the legitimacy of the state in any way, shape, or form, you are, as far as we are concerned, a statist. In other words, somebody who believes the state should exist in some capacity.
If the state exists, even it can and will necessarily expand its influence over society, since it's economically designed to do this, and there's nothing within a society that has a state, the legal system at least, that stops it from doing so. I mean, that's another question you should probably ask about the Constitution. Is the society that we have a result of the Constitution, or was the Constitution powerless to prevent it? Those are your only 2 options, because either way, we have the society that we have. So,
I mean, I'm just saying that by the definition I'm pulling up, I'm not a statist, but if you want to like give out a definition that if you believe in even the tiniest ever so government that has the tiniest bit of control, they are a statist, well then I guess I would have to just give the benefit of the doubt on that. I don't agree, but does that make them a bad person and like your enemy?
Oh no, I don't think all statists are bad people, but I think that they're not applying their beliefs consistently, because that's something a lot of people don't realize, is that it is not actually possible to logically be a statist. It's possible to understand how somebody...
Oh, that got it.
It's possible to understand how somebody can be a statist.
Are you still there, Night Shift?
They can't...
Yeah, I just had some technical problems.
Okay.
Okay, Mag is gonna be. I'm sorry. Mag is gonna be joining us real soon. So.
Okay. Well, statists can't necessarily justify the state, and that's the problem, and that's why it's sort of important to establish this.
Yeah, nobody here is saying that statists are bad people. There are plenty of good. Like my parents are statists. I don't think my parents are bad people.
Everyone here who's not a statist was at one point. So,
well, okay, maybe saying bad people is a little bit hyperbolic, and in a way somebody could say like a loaded question, but does it make them like one of your political enemies.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends who are statists. I don't think, I still hang out with them. I still call them a friend, and I will debate them if they want to debate me on this. But, for instance, one of them's a socialist. I'm not going to sit here and, pretend to be a socialist for a bit or say that I'm not, to some degree, a political rival to them. I mean, I wouldn't call them a rival, but, I think what you're trying to say is, are we supposed to, go after you or whatever just because you're a statist? No. Is that kind of what you mean?
I mean, my main thing is, obviously people can disagree on a few issues. I mean, if people agreed on 110% of everything, then the whole world would be boring. But my thing is that whenever I hear somebody saying you're a statist, etc., I mean, even to minarchists, well, then it almost seems to be kind of I don't know, a negative stigma kind of implied. And
you're saying it's kind of like discounting.
Statism is not an ideology. It is I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a derogatory term, but it is more of a label which was created by libertarians to describe the fact that all statism will inevitably conclude with the exact same thing.
Well, and I guess that would mean that 95% of the world is statists.
Yeah.
By that definition.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, it's important to understand. Nobody here is we don't obviously we argue with statists and we have debates and whatnot, but we don't hate them, or we don't I don't discount their ideas immediately just because they're statists. I might joke about that, but I do listen to them and try to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, it's like teaching your little brother about life, basically.
I don't hate statists. Yeah, I think that at least in the case of a minarchist, I make jokes about it, like what's the difference between a minarchist and an anarchist? 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
It's like how the media depicts anarchists. They show
everything that makes somebody look scary. A large black hoodie which obscures their face because the hood casts a shadow over the top of their head. Probably wearing a mask.
A V from Vendetta mask.
Oh yeah, you want to hear something real funny?
Go ahead, mate.
Real quick, and then I want to get into the topics that I've been wanting to talk about.
Okay, something real funny. So I was commenting on a statist video with a commenter, like a statist commenter, and he used the movie Mad Max as an argument against anarchy. Mad Max isn't even an anarchist movie. It has a government in it. He works for the Maximum Force Patrol, which is run by the government.
Mm-hmm. Anybody who unironically cites Fallout or Mad Max has a reputation to anarchism, or just any actual fiction instead of actually citing scientific studies or history or actual arguments. Anybody who does that is just not really. They're not taking themselves seriously. So why should
I know. And it shows they don't know anything about either.
It's like saying, "What about Somalia?" Hey, look, Max here.
Oh yeah. You think
hey, Max.
Hey.
Hey.
All right. Okay. Hold on. You think statism is so great? Well, just look at the movie Star Wars. It worked out so great having an empire there.
Oh yeah.
Perfect.
I don't know if this is one of the tweets you're going to bring up, but I really like this one from him. Reminder that the economic pressure of the free market, in quotation marks, is directly responsible for mass migration, both legal and illegal, into the United States. Sure, 60 million immigrants is bad for our kids' schools and neighborhoods, but it's good for slashing labor costs for big business. What a fucking retard.
What?
Hi, Shimoli, what's up?
It's very clear he doesn't actually understand the economics of immigration either. But that wasn't what we were going to go into. But
Do you think he woke up that day and was just like, you know what? I feel like sounding retarded on Twitter right now.
So it's very strange that people who argue from supply side economic positions argue that immigration is bad for the economy, because the basis for all supply side policy is something which is referred to as Say's law. So investment, an aggregate supply will necessarily create an aggregate demand, and vice versa.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And Say's law is probably best demonstrated in the labor market, and we have several studies to point to which prove this, that show that labor markets improve as there are more people in each specific area, because there are more consumers to buy more products as well as more laborers. That leads to an expansion of the market. What leads to costs reducing is not that it's easier to hire people and the cost of labor goes down. It's that there's more competition because there are more consumers, and because there are more consumers, there's more money entering the market, and since there's more money, more people can become producers, and more people can produce more and invest more into creating new innovations. So
I have a question. So are you of the mindset that because of the existence of the welfare state, that there should be like a restriction on immigration, so that there aren't like millions of millions?
I think that we should trade around the state and undermine the state by taking away as much of their revenue as possible. I think that both of them are illegitimate.
Yeah, I know. I know that you're an anarcho-capitalist and you believe that both should not exist. I mean, that of course is logically consistent there. I'm saying that because of the existence of the welfare state, should there be a restriction on immigration so there aren't illegitimate people who are illegitimately here sucking up the public teat?
No. Well, firstly, I mean, we also can demonstrate, I don't have like the specific studies pulled up, but I can send them to you through Discord if you like, of the fact that that's not actually true, that first generation immigrants don't actually take more than they pay in taxes. But they're really just more concerned. All the studies we have show they're really more concerned with actually just trying to work more than anything else. I mean, they're not like this collective hive mind trying to create an authoritarian state, unsurprisingly. But
actually, I want to add something to that.
Hold on. The bordertarian argument, especially from an anarchist perspective here, that's being presented, has never made any sense to me. I mean, why are you defending the welfare state all of a sudden? I mean, if anything, the state being unable to fund itself through the welfare state would lead to a form of accelerationism, where they're going to have to start cutting more and more programs because they couldn't afford themselves to fund themselves, even assuming that your premise is true.
Just one question I have.
The welfare state?
What was that? I couldn't hear you. Someone talked over you.
Was I defending the welfare state? I don't recall my statement.
You argued that we need. You asked me if we needed limits to immigration to try and keep the welfare state stable.
So no, to prevent illegitimate people from like sucking up the public from the public dole, like draining taxes in rather illegitimate ways, I would say. And on the point of illegal immigrants and welfare, here's a video that I'm leaking in the group chat, actually, of where the original article is in the description of this video too, by the way. But in that article, it goes talking about how illegal immigrants use, I think they're called DCINs. They're like abbreviated that way, of where that they can like get child tax credits, so they get like welfare checks via their tax returns.
So not paying taxes is all of a sudden a bad thing in the libertarian mindset.
Just one question I have. Question I have. Is it okay if I ask one question here?
Sure.
But doesn't the state? I'm not anti-state completely, but doesn't the state have the right to tell, say, who goes through their land and not goes through their land? Doesn't the state have the right to say that?
No, the state has zero rights because the state is an individual.
Yeah, you have the right to tell people not to come on your property, but since the state can't demonstrate rightful dominion over what territory it claims a monopoly on arbitration over, it does not have the right to tell people whether or not they can enter it or whether or not they can't leave.
The only thing the state has the right to is to fuck off, pretty much.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's what I want to ask. Here's something I want to ask.
I did not hear Esso's earlier comment, just saying about the welfare, but I couldn't hear it.
Well, what were you going to say, Night Shift?
Well, and here's one thing I want to ask. Why is people not paying their taxes a bad thing? When did that suddenly become a bad thing? Isn't that what we want to do?
Yeah.
I mean, it starves the state out. So, I mean, why is people not paying their taxes, a bad thing? And, I mean, secondly,
I wasn't going on about taxes. I was going on purely about welfare being given out to people who do not deserve it by
nobody deserves it. No one deserves it.
Well, even more so, I would say that people who illegally immigrate into a country, even more so, don't deserve it than somebody who is either already born here or naturalized here as a legal migrant citizen.
Well, but who cares?
Nobody deserves it. Yeah, whether or not they were born, you understand that a nation state is literally just a monopoly on arbitration, attempting to declare jurisdiction over a certain plot of land, right? That's all it is?
I mean, yeah, sure, but I still don't see how that makes, how that negates the point that...
The point is that either way, it's illegitimate.
Even more illegitimate to welfare than the people who actually live in that.
But that's my point. It's illegitimate in the first place. So why is it more illegitimate to move here and claim welfare programs than to live here and claim welfare programs? Either way, welfare is not legitimate and the state is not legitimate. So how is it?
Yeah, I agree.
Either
welfare
way,
is legitimate. Period.
Well, either way, like whether or not it, like if, for instance, the because people always say, well, then the state will just tax us more. So, but my argument to that is, okay, well, even if that's the route they take, rather than slashing government programs in order to pay for these programs, the other way around is, well, if people are being taxed more and more of their income is being taken, well, then that will just make them see just how useless the government is.
I mean, I don't think that's going to work because liberals don't change their minds so fast. They're pretty...
Well, if they're taxing 80% of your income, you'll change your mind right quick.
I know, but many billionaires are liberals, happens to be, and even though they're being taxed to death, they still vote liberal. You know what I'm saying?
I even want to mention really quickly one thing. I actually have read articles. I was part of a project on this back when I was in college. I was part of a project on this where we were going into people crossing the border, or at least the southern border, and how much in conjunction with illegal immigration, violent crime, and welfare have gone up. And it showed statistically on several different statistical graphs that violent crime and welfare in conjunction with illegal immigration has gone down precipitously, at least in connection with that. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is that illegal immigration isn't really adding enormously to the welfare or crime rate. And really, the most on the violent crime thing that I saw was people committing crimes against immigrants who come into our country. So I can post that if you want, but I mean, that's at least what I saw.
Hey, Toasted.
Yes. What's up?
So, a quick question. My fault, Dark Khan. I just got a quick question for him.
Okay.
You know, when the state that was in control of Germany during the pre-World War II, post-World War I era, right? It was the Nazis. It was the Nazi government at the time, right? Nazi party in control. When they
there was another one that was in control before them, but
the Kaiser Republic, right? Was it Kaiser Republic?
No, not the Kaiser Republic. It was the something Republic, but they were in power in between World War I and the
Weimar Republic.
Here we go. The Weimar Republic.
Go, yeah.
Oh my! I keep calling it Kaiser. I don't know why, but when the Nazis took control and they started expelling the Jews, telling them where and how they're going to live, and who can enter the country, who couldn't. Was that okay?
Yes, because I mean, I'm not trying to defend the state, but I'm for decentralization, meaning that a government, if we decentralize the stuff, then government cannot force you to pay taxes. I believe that they could do. I mean, everybody could do whatever they want as long as they're not harming everybody. If government is not harming anybody but not allowing people in their land, they could do that. Really, that's all about property rights.
What was that?
The government has no right to property. Bottom line.
I mean, their own property they do. No, I'm saying
the government can't own any property because the government is not an individual, and on top of that, any property that the government does own was stolen from someone else. Either that or it was unclaimed.
Firstly, this is something a lot of people don't understand. The state needs to steal in order to merely exist, and the reason why this is because the state doesn't produce anything necessarily. It doesn't have any resources to start with. And that's the reason why, in order to have a state, you need a monopoly on arbitration, because it needs to be able to establish a monopoly on credit so that it can control trade, so that it can tax itself, and it needs to be able to legislate that it can steal from people. Because it wouldn't be able to naturally demonstrate those things if it didn't have a monopoly on arbitration, which is why it needs one.
Yeah, of course, and I agree with totally what you said.
Hold on, I wasn't done.
Sorry.
I don't necessarily disagree with you that we need to decentralize to make it more difficult to tax. It's just that the natural conclusion of that is anarchy. I just thought I'd make you aware of that, because if the state's not capable of actually monitoring your transactions and trying to tax you, then the state can't exist.
Yeah.
I mean,
do you mind if I speak right now? And I'm sorry for the word salads that I'm trying to say, but Shimoli. But what I'm just trying to say is one of the things you said is that they're not individuals, but neither is a company. It's owned, but it is owned by individuals. Government is owned by individuals, though. You know what I'm saying? It's run by individuals.
It's really
it's run by a group of people. That's what government is. You know what I'm saying?
The difference between a company and an individual is that all association within a company is completely voluntary. Companies don't steal from people. Hey, Corey, mute yourself. Somebody's talking in the background.
Okay, baby.
Really distracting.
Okay, baby girl. Hey, Exo, I actually what you just followed up with, if that is actually why agorism is going to work, because when the government cannot monitor your transactions, they cannot tax you. They can when they cannot monitor your income, when they cannot monitor your transactions, they cannot tax you for those things. That's why agorism is going to work. I just wanted to follow that up with that. And I mean, Americap and Mag actually talked about that in one of the videos. I love that video, by the way. But yes, I mean, what you basically talked about is why agorism will eventually succeed and will get rid of the state.
Yeah, I mean, we can see that innovations as they're carrying along are just decentralizing the market. We got things like 3D printers, which, by the way, I bought one and was building it pretty much all afternoon, and I had to stop so I could stream here. But yeah, you have cryptocurrency, which innovates the need for banking out of existence, and you've got 3D printers, which it decentralizes production. It makes it so more people can produce different commodities and enter the market, so they don't necessarily have to work. And you've got all these different commodities. Eventually, the state is going to be abolished, and it's at the point, and it'll be abolished at the point where it can't compete with all the peer-to-peer associations which are existing that it can't monitor. But getting into the point which I was trying to make before I got cut off, all association within companies is completely voluntary, and the state requires coercion to exist. So, yeah, a company is really just a collection of different free-acting individuals, but the state is a group of rulers trying to subjugate everybody else to their own arbitrary whims through violent coercion. So.
A couple of things that I want to
just
address.
one quick. Can I just say one quick thing to his response? And I'm not. That's why I'm for decentralization. I believe that if we just decentralize everything, I'm not for abolishing the state completely. Because I believe that that if, let's say, if I murder you, then they could stop it. But I'm for just decentralizing. So let's say they get too greedy. Let's say they want to tax me, which is robbery. They're not able to do that because if they're decentralized, a court will say you're not allowed to do that. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry for putting words out. I tend to do that.
How do they put them?
Hold on. Let Darkon talk. Darkon talk.
Okay. A couple of things. First off, Night Shift mentions being agorism will eventually take over. That'll be eventually the end goal of anarcho-capitalism. And if I may just put anarchy synonymous with agorism, I mean, it's not necessarily me and Toasted, well, at least I am not right now anyways, completely arguing against the abolishing of government. But what I'm primarily arguing is what happens in between now and that time. I mean, particularly when it comes to the issue of immigration. And I don't think that, and I think it's kind of hard to vote for vote out the existence of a government when you have a whole bunch of people immigrating to the country that will vote for higher welfare and stuff like that, and just a bigger government all in general. And,
can I answer that? Can I answer
also,
that?
I want to
let's just let him talk.
And second point about crime stats, Night Shift. Here from the General Accountability Office, actually, this is the American Thinker citing the General Account.
I got my statistics from the FBI.
Well,
those were FBI statistics.
Well, the General Accountability Office says that illegal immigrants commit crime at a higher rate than the rest of the citizenry in the United States.
Is that a right-wing leaning organization, or are they independent?
The General Accountability Office?
Yes.
I mean, I presume that they were just a unbiased. I mean, do I have any real reason to question the credibility completely? I mean, I've never seen any.
The only reason I'm asking is they're coming up with different conclusions than the FBI. So, I mean, obviously, either the FBI is lying or they're lying. One of them is lying.
The FBI, I will admit, they're a state organization. I will admit that they could very well be lying. But I mean,
I got a question. So the FBI is saying that legal citizens are committing crime at a higher rate than illegal immigrants?
No. That illegal immigrants are committing crimes at lower rates. It's just that they are committing crimes at lower rates, or that violent crime is being committed in conjunction with illegal immigrants at a much lower rate.
At a much lower rate. So,
yeah.
General Accountability Office, if I recall the numbers most accurately, actually, I'm going to pull it back up here, a computer, but it's I don't know, something of 50 every one. There's 50 homicides committed in every 100,000 illegal immigrants, whereas opposed to the legal citizen will actually. I cannot remember what. Damn it!
That's not a huge amount. That's not a huge amount. 50 and 100,000.
Okay. So, if illegal aliens committed them over. The annual rate would be 50. Okay, a comparison. Oh, it cites the FBI as well. It's been a while since I actually read this article right here, but it's like double digits of what the homicide rate for illegal immigrants are compared to the single digits of the homicide rate of legal citizens per 100,000 people in each group.
I can post my statistics if you guys want to do that. I can post where I found it and whatnot. You guys can look it over. So I can't post them here.
Guys.
Yeah, what's
Plus,
up?
I just want to answer something that Dark Content. Oh no, go ahead, Mac. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to tell you something Ancap told me. He tried getting on, but he got disconnected and he has to leave anyway. Just wanted to state that he's not coming, and I'm staying here in his place.
Oh no.
Yeah, wait.
I've been trying to pay attention to the live chat, so.
Good.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I
continue,
can't.
sorry.
I can't stay too long either. I was put on hold with the insurance company, a student loan company, so I have to wait about maybe 30, 45 minutes. So I just decided to join.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
No problem.
Yeah, you're cool, dude.
Anyway, sorry for interrupting.
Well, and I just wanted to answer Dark Con on the first thing that he mentioned about with immigrants coming in, voting for more things, making the government larger. That ultimately will lead more towards the dollar's collapse. It will lead more towards government collapse. As I mean, the government's going to get larger. That's going to tear into the debt. The debt is already at 105%. It's going to get more over time. And ultimately, yes, that will lead to a collapse of the dollar. It will lead to a collapse of the system. And ultimately, it will lead to the state's destruction. I did
a pretty detailed video on this, why the state is fundamentally unsustainable. I mean, if you want to see a more detailed explanation, go ahead and watch that.
I think what Dark Con is
shameless shilling.
I think
what was that, Americap?
I think what Dark Con's asking is what exactly is going to lead to state collapse and anarchism. I think what from here to now and how are we going to deal with the issues between those 2 points, and particularly with immigration, the answer to that is it's not really simple, but it's basically with agorism. Essentially, what it is it's adopting. It's basically investing in the counter economy. The counter economy, if enough people adopt it over time, will eventually cause state collapse, because when you adopt cryptocurrency and you use that as a medium for exchange as opposed to the dollar, you can't tax crypto, or at least you can try, but there's no way to tell whether or not a person has any crypto, let alone a ton of it, or how much to tax of that, or anything. It would be completely
the more the currency becomes valuable, and the more people use assets like 3D printers and trade on a peer-to-peer basis, the more competitive and profitable these markets will be, while cheaper to enter for just the average person. It'll be innovated out of existence, for lack of a better way of putting it, because it'll simply be more expensive to actually trade with the state or organizations connected with the state. So in order to compete, a bunch of companies will just start dumping the state, and the state's not going to be able to do anything about it, because they're not going to have any resources.
Essentially, the more worthless the dollar becomes through either immigration problems or the government's lack of, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the worse the government gets, the more people will want to abandon the dollar. Essentially,
and the more people that abandon it, the more they're going to switch over to cryptocurrency.
So that's something a lot of people are starting to overlook. Like, you're starting to see companies like Walmart creating cryptocurrencies to trade for certain commodities, and this is because of a point which a lot of agorists sort of look over, is the fact that once it becomes more competitive to trade around the state on a peer-to-peer basis, companies will essentially have to start doing that or simply go out of business.
I got a question towards Night Shift too, by the way, saying that if you basically, to put it kind of bluntly, start importing or more Democrats, more potential Democrats immigrated into the country, more potential Democrat voters voting to like increase the welfare state and the size and scope of the government, that ultimately it will collapse under its own weight. Well, that almost sounds like to get into the point of riots and stuff like that.
And my response is it may lead to that. It may actually even lead to full civil war. I mean,
here's my thing with achieving anarcho-capitalism. I would rather that if it got achieved more peacefully than it did violently.
I know. No. I totally agree. I totally agree with that. I totally agree. I would love nothing more than
the most peaceful option, though. For one thing, hold on. It is the most peaceful option, though. Out of the other options, you have revolution, which is like 95%, not even 95%, because there's not a single example where it's never led to a more despotic society that anyone could point to in history. So you're 100. Hold on. You're 100% guaranteed to get a more despotic society than already exists. That's because you're creating essentially a bunch. Can you guys mute your mics? It's annoying. It's making me lose my train of thought.
Okay. First Eso, then I want Mag to go next. She's been waiting to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just so you all know, I'm the moderator. I'm the host of this show. So, yeah.
That's fine. Okay. But yeah, there's a bunch of people making noise through their mics. So.
Okay. Okay.
So finish your point so I can also say something as well, because I want to say something about revolutions as well.
Well, they never work, and the reason they never work is because you still have the monopoly on arbitration and the statist framework. All you're doing is you're putting new people in the head of that monopoly on arbitration, and that's the reason why 100% of all times it's ever happened. It's just led to even more expansive statism. And secondly, the fact you can try and vote, which again, 100% you're guaranteed to never achieve any difference out of that, because I've already explained earlier why that'll never happen. So with agorism, it's the only method which is guaranteed to actually get some results, and it's the only method where violence is merely a possibility instead of a guarantee.
Yep. And the thing I just want to say for revolutions, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong with this, but for a revolution to happen and a leader will lead people into revolution, but there's two problems with it. One, when they finally win, they'll go still back into a state because they'll have this power gap, and the person who was leading them will just end up being the leader, which will create another state. Secondly, the reason why agorism also works is the fact that people are able to adjust to living without the state to the point that when it eventually dies, they're okay with it. But if you just get rid of it all once like that, there's such a rough transition that people are just going to go back into it anyway. And the other thing I want to say for voting as well is basically you're voting your rights away. So that's just going to lead back to the state.
Another thing to keep in mind is that the thing about violence, Night Shift kind of described it a bit more grimly than I think is really in reality. I think what he means by there might be riots or whatever is essentially, like Mag said, there will be a gradual transition. People will get used to living without the state. People will get used to trading in crypto slowly over time as it becomes more and more convenient for them to do so. So you won't have people, oh my gosh, nobody's accepting my dollar, time to riot in the streets. It'll be more like, oh my gosh, and this is the government, nobody's paying us. We're about to, basically starve out money-wise, and nobody will give us a loan. Time to start busting down doors and taking people's stuff by force.
Well, the kind of riots that I was thinking was that all of a sudden a whole bunch of entitled, lazy bitches will be bitching about how they're not getting their welfare checks or whatever.
Get a job.
Well, and
Well, yeah, tell them that, but that's not going to be their mentality.
Yeah, well, that's the
Who's
thing.
showing the
In a
picture?
society
What
where
is
you have a
that?
more valuable currency, where it's easier to actually earn a living, and where you have this giant counter market where everyone around you is trading, there's no excuse to sit around and do nothing.
Yep.
Okay.
Who's showing a picture, and what is that?
I was about to say something.
Corey. It's Corey. It's a book.
Corey, what book do you have?
I am holding The Age of Revolution and Reaction. It's a book that talks about the European revolutions that happened after the French Revolution and how they all led to just the status quo going back to normal and the government just staying the same even after those violent revolutions and wars.
Nice.
And I want to add one thing on top of everything. What I was talking about, there may be riots, there may be civil war. What I meant is that it might happen. I would love nothing more than for the Agorist revolution to take its place and for this to be like a slow transition over 10 to 20 years. But realistically, right now, what we're looking at is it could potentially lead to civil war. It could potentially lead to revolution even now as we're going at it. And even in the aftermath of that, though, the agorist revolutionary way could still take over. When the state is gone, people could turn to cryptocurrency. It could still go in that. It could still. I mean, the bright side is it could still go towards the agorist way of thinking. The agorist revolution could play out. It's just right now where we currently are. Things are kind of looking a little bit grimmer than they probably should be, and it may very well lead to that. Now, hopefully, it will not, but it may.
I have a follow-up question.
Revolution and takeover, you're describing it, I think, a bit inaccurately. Agorism, the idea of an agorist revolution is literally just finding ways to trade out of the state, around the state, and doing this so much that it deprives them of the revenue they need in order to sustain themselves. And an agorist takeover is just that as well. People trading with one another around the state. So I don't really know how that's an accurate description in either of those cases.
Well, it just stops another state from coming to power. Go ahead.
Maybe if you're using the term revolution as loosely as you possibly can to just any sort of systemic change, but yeah, it's not violent. It's not like a violent overthrow and attempts to implement a new system.
Agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would like to continue, but we've been going on for a little too long, so I want to try to keep going because I don't want my live stream to go for over 4 hours ever again, like I did one. That would have been.
I just sorry. Then we can do that, please.
Okay.
One question.
Let's do that one question, and then we got to move on.
Okay. What do you guys think with the depleting of the US dollar? Is it going to lead to a revolution, or is it going to lead to agorism?
Agorism.
Hopefully agorism first.
Because people will just simply start trading in gold and crypto in order to sustain themselves. That's what happened after the Great Depression. So many people were trading with precious metals that FDR had to sign Executive Order 6105 and have the Treasury confiscate all privately held gold reserves.
Okay, now next topic.
All right, so we're moving on with Nick's thread. So his third tweet, Eso, go ahead and read it.
All right, let me find it here. I was looking around the internet. Oh, sweet Jesus, this one's bad too.
Yeah, it is.
When they talk about individualism, they paint a picture of a frontiersman or the homesteader. In practice, it means you're isolated, atomized, and your relative power over society is reduced to 1 over a million. You could choose what brand of shampoo you'll purchase.
That's not an argument at all.
Not an argument.
And why should you have...
on top of just another demonstration that he doesn't know what individualism is, he's clearly just projecting here, because in a actual voluntarist society, you would simply associate with somebody else if you don't like what somebody is doing to you. And in a state society, well, you can't do dick about what the state does to you, except to beg to them, which is the process of voting. So, in reality, the idea of relative power in society being 1 in a million, that's what statism is.
I just have a comment to make. As far as individualism, you'll supposedly be totally isolated. That is about as objectively untrue of a statement as saying that there's absolutely no purpose to own guns except for hunting.
Right.
Yeah, he thinks that he thinks that
voluntarily coalesce into groups.
Well,
Yeah.
what does Nick Fuentes even mean by that? Does he mean that? Is he trying to say that ANCAPs and libertarians don't socialize, that we don't get together?
Yeah.
It sounds like it.
It's almost like he thinks we're a bunch of hermit crabs that like to crawl into our little space and, it just...
No.
Look at this.
We believe in interaction. We believe in interaction.
Yeah. What he's saying is that you all are a bunch of neck-bearded atheists living in your mom's basement that never comes out. That's what he's saying.
Hey, my neck beard.
What?
Hey, that is untrue. My neck beard is fucking awesome.
I'm a neck beard.
I have an awesome beard. Thank you very much.
I mean, I got a beard and mustache, but I'm a Christian, so hello.
Yeah, you don't want.
I'm
You don't want to look
I'm a
like
Roman
Satan.
Catholic.
I'm mostly going off of Freedom Toon's own parody he did of how libertarians get stereotyped.